All right, and we are live. Hello, and welcome back to the Gumtree of Liberty podcast. I'm your host, LibertyDownUnder, and I've got with me today AngeloForLiberty to talk about the Rittenhouse trial and the resulting probable protests.
Yep.
Uh,
Yeah, we'll see what happens tonight.
yes, well, they've already got schools closed. Apparently, I've heard that they've already got
Yeah,
schools,
schools are
closed
closed.
down.
Places like businesses and boarded up. Some of them are still open. It really depends. I'm not personally from Kenosha, Wisconsin. For your viewers, I'm from Long Island, New York. But being in America and having access to, or not access to, because I'm sure you guys have access to the same stuff, but having more of an in-depth knowledge on other media sources than what you guys have, because as you were saying just before we started, that it's more of the CNN, MSNBC, left-leaning sort of. He was a mass murderer. He was a white supremacist. He was a horrible person, and he went out to kill as many people as he could. It's just a bullshit narrative, and I'll break it down to whatever degree you would like me to.
Yeah, he's so racist that you had a white guy killing a white guy killing white guys, and apparently that's racist as well. So
Yes.
I
If
love
you
their logic
kill
there.
anybody, you're a racist. Anybody at all. Doesn't matter if it's your own race.
Yes. I guess just maybe if you give a bit of background to the trial and what happened in Kenosha.
Yeah, so pretty much this all started because of the George Floyd incident, and then they were saying it sparked the 2020 Summer of Love, which is how Anthony described it, which was phenomenal. But yeah, so pretty much there were protests going on the whole summer because Derek Chauvin, a cop from, why can't I remember this case right now? Anyway, he killed George Floyd and knelt on his neck for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, whatever it was, ended up killing him. He also did have large doses of fentanyl in his system, George Floyd. He had prior convictions. He had prior experiences like this with the cops. That's neither here nor there. There were protests because of it. So basically what happened was they weren't just protests. They tried to make it out to be peaceful protests, some fiery but peaceful protests. It was riots, it was looting, it was absolute anarchy, and everybody likes to call me an anarchist and that I want little government, whatever. That's what anarchy is, when you have too much government and you have people in these debacles pretty much, and they don't feel like they're being heard any other way besides to cause violence. So basically that was going on the whole summer. Kyle Rittenhouse decided that he wanted to go defend his friend's father's parking garage or parking area. It was called Car Source 3, I believe, and he was there with a couple other people trying to protect it that night. So from there, he began getting attacked. He began getting run down on by groups of people who were protesting, quote unquote protesting. They were rioting, and there were numerous slurs yelled at him: "Get him, kill him, we want him dead." He ended up, after that whole night ended, he ended up killing 2 people and injuring 1. But the breakdown of the case had a lot more intricacy in it. The basics of it was that he was there to protect that business and protect it from rioters, looters, or anything, because they had surveyed the destruction from the night before and decided, damn, well, maybe all these cars are really fucked up now. Maybe we should try to prevent that from happening again tonight. So he went down there to assist with people, to give medical aid, because he was a EMT cadet. He was also a firefighter cadet. He was a police cadet. He was an all-American white boy. So he felt like he had this sort of hero complex, and he wanted to save the day, being that the police weren't going to do shit, which we could see from the videos that they were just standing off to the side while all of this was happening. He was being chased down while trying to assist other people. And at the one point where he killed Huber, with the guy with the skateboard, and then injured Grosskreutz, who was the guy that testified, who had his bicep blown out. In that situation, he was down on the ground. back to the ground, just laying there, completely defenseless. Besides having the gun on him, he was getting attacked. There were a large group of people running over toward him, and as soon as he pointed the gun, they stopped. But two ended up coming toward him. That was Huber and Grosskreutz. Huber ended up hitting him with, or trying to. They tried to make it out to be blocking the shots with a wooden skateboard. I don't know how bullets work 100%, but I'm assuming they can go through this thick.
Yeah, you think so?
Skateboard made out of wood. So he wasn't going to block it. He was going to attack him to try to neutralize Kyle Rittenhouse. Even though Rittenhouse had not shot, he might have actually shot Rosenbaum before that. But at the time, he was not an active shooter. He was not shooting anybody. He was down on the ground, back to the ground, defenseless. And they ended up coming over to him, hit him over the head with the skateboard. He felt like he was under attack, fired the first shot, got him off of him. And then from there, Grosskreutz ended up, he was still in the momentum of coming over toward him, stopped, backed up, took a step back, pulled out his gun, and had his hands up in the air, one with his cell phone, one with the Glock that he was holding, and then he positioned that down toward Kyle's head. So at that point, Kyle has a firearm aimed at his head. He's going to defend himself, and he shot, and not even using lethal force because he shot him in the bicep. So he was able to neutralize the threat without even killing that person. There were a total of 2 deaths that night due to Kyle and 1 injury. For anybody saying that he was a mass shooter, just look at the numbers. But then obviously there was a bunch of shit to play out in the trial, and we can break that down if you have any questions on any specifics.
Sure. So, was there 5 charges against Kyle that came from?
I believe there was 5. There was the murder of Rosenbaum, the murder of Huber, the assault or the aggravated assault or whatever of Grosskreutz, and then there were 2 more charges. I'm not 100% sure on what they were, but
I believe there was the ownership of a firearm.
Well, no, they actually got rid of the illegal possession of a firearm charge because of they ended up throwing that out a couple days in previous. I heard that they threw that out from the court, so that wasn't one of the charges anymore. But that was like one of the big things that they were trying to make us think about on the left was, or on the anti-Kyle side, which is mainly the left anyway. So what they tried to say was that he crossed state lines with a weapon that wasn't his and was an active shooter trying to kill people. That's not at all what occurred. He was from Illinois. He lived in Illinois, but also his father lived in Kenosha. And Dominic Black was his friend. He lived in Kenosha. So the gun was in state. It was registered in state. And the funny part about all this actually too is he traveled out of state technically, and he drove 25 minutes to get to Kenosha, or 30 minutes. And now you got this guy Grosskreutz, who drove all the way downstate to go to Kenosha, but he drove 45 minutes. So even though he's from out of state, he was still closer in relation to Kenosha than the other guy was. So and they both brought firearms with them. So how are you going to say that he had bad motives when somebody else, because he came from another state, when somebody else did the same exact thing and came from further away than he did? So the basis that they were trying to use of him even being there in the first place, do I think that he should have been there in the first place? Absolutely not. Do I think that was a right situation to put a 17-year-old in? Absolutely not. He had a hero complex, and he ended up having some unintended consequences from that. Do I think that he's a mass murderer? Absolutely not. Do I think he's a kid that made a stupid decision and he's never going to do that again? Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess that is a good way to look at it. He shouldn't have been there, but he was in that position, so we have to, I guess, defend his right to self-defense. Well, I guess one thing we've seen come out of this is the criticism of the idea that you have the right to self-defense. Like, the way I see it is the left doesn't like that right because it's an individual right against the collective. We've seen, Kyle was shooting against towards a mob of protesters. So it's individual using his individual rights against the collective, and I think that's a big reason why the left is being so critical of the right to self-defense here. But I want to get your thoughts on exactly how that fits in with Second Amendment and the right to own a firearm and use a firearm in self-defense. Because I know
All
that's
right.
being twisted by the media in a big way to paint him as the villain for using a firearm at all.
Yeah, so I've actually heard a really stupid argument too that he somebody said to me that they would be 100% behind the fact that he was in the act of self-defense if he had, instead of had the gun on him and he was getting chased down, if he would have somehow found a pipe, like a pipe on the ground or a stick or something else that he would just pick up in the moment and use to defend himself. Now, that pretty much takes away from the whole entirety of the Second Amendment, which is having a gun to defend yourself. The main purpose of our Second Amendment here in the United States is to defend ourselves against tyrannical governments, because that's how our country was founded. We had to fight back against tyrannical government. So basically, that right protects all of your other rights, because without that right, you don't have any sort of means to self-defense. Now, when there's so much debate over this in court systems and whatever about the Second Amendment and the right to self-defense, as a libertarian, it shall not be infringed is very clear. Shall not be infringed means that you will not make any laws prohibiting or restricting the use or purchasing power of these firearms. You will not, whatever firearms it may be. Now the case against self-defense here in this case, it was mainly used to say that, well, we got to look at the gun laws. We got to understand the gun laws, and the gun laws to libertarians are complete bullshit. There should be no gun laws. So they were trying to say that he brought the gun across state lines, which wasn't true. They were trying to bring in the whole thing of the FOID card, which I even defended at one point. I said, yeah, well, he didn't have an FOID card. Didn't fucking matter. So that's another bullshit issue. There's just so much that they threw into this that after the defense and the prosecution going through their examinations of the witnesses and testimony from actual law experts and people who know firearms, this was a clear-cut case of self-defense. If you have somebody that is within inches of you, that you are turned around, you are running in a certain direction, you hear a gunshot, and then you turn around and you find a man, armed or not armed, it doesn't matter because you are in a fight or flight at that point. You were turning around, there's a man within 2 inches of you about to grab your gun from you. You're going to shoot him because you don't want him grabbing the gun. And that was another one of the points that the prosecution was trying to make, that, well, he didn't have his hand on the gun. So would you like Kyle to hand him over the gun so that now he has a reason to defend himself? So he has to grab the gun back. It's just such stupidity that went on here, that they were trying to pull the most bullshit arguments out. But the right to self-defense is the right to self-defense. You have the right to defend yourself. If there is any sort of person or entity, government entity coming after you, you have the right to defend yourself, you and your family. But at the same time, with the other two cases that happened with Huber and Grosskreutz, they were both near him or literally on top of him, and one of them was holding a gun. So it's such a clear-cut self-defense case that I don't really know how people can argue it. I don't know what you've heard or what your guys' news has said, but I'm assuming it's just the same BS rhetoric that we've seen from CNN, MSNBC, and all those.
Yeah, well, I don't know exactly how US laws work, but I know here in Queensland, Australia, you have the right to self-defense if there's a reasonable apprehension that you would be caused grievous bodily harm or die. So I guess it's the same over there. Probably, like, if there's a reasonable apprehension that you could die, you're allowed to shoot to kill in self-defense.
Yeah. And the thing about our court system too is that you have to prove beyond a reasonable doubt. So that's one of the big parts that not a lot of people get when it comes to these cases. You need to prove beyond any sort of reasonable doubt that their acts were either malicious or that they did commit a crime, beyond a reasonable doubt. And those are 3 very big words in court cases that a lot of people seem to forget. So if there is a case where, in Kyle's situation, somebody is reaching for his gun, that provides reasonable doubt. If somebody has a gun on them pointed at the defendant's head, that's reasonable doubt. If somebody has a skateboard, which could have been pretty thick, it could have been thick wood, still not stopping a bullet. But if even if it was thick wood and they were getting bashed over the head with it, right to self-defense. It's very clear cut, and that's why it's such a big issue for me, is because we're nowadays taking the most basic of issues, such as the self-defense case, and trying to blow it up into a racial issue. Oh, well, he shot black guys. That was completely untrue, and the media came out saying that. Oh, well, he crossed state lines with a weapon that wasn't his. That's completely untrue again, something that the media has been portraying this whole entire time. And it's the whole thing of the media portraying this and putting this out there between the last year from when this happened to when the trial happened this year, that they have been putting out all of this information and gathering up all of these people who are on the fringe, and they just want to fight and they want to protest and they want to riot again. And now you're just fueling the fire for them to do that, because you know that it's going to be a not guilty verdict. You understand that. If you look at the actual facts and evidence provided, it was clear-cut self-defense, and I'll keep saying it because it's true.
Yeah, like that's the thing that for me that really bothers me, is that there isn't much consideration of the evidence that's out there by the left. It's the same talking points over and over again. I remember I've seen people arguing that there's no evidence for Rosenbaum being a pedophile, and that because I remember that was brought up at one point, that one of the people that he was killed was Joseph Rosenbaum, a convicted pedophile. I remember people on the left saying, there's no evidence of that. They told us to stop jumping to conclusions, when in fact this whole time they've been jumping to the conclusion that he's guilty, when in fact he isn't. But even I think today, was it Governor Newsom that came out and said that he's still guilty, even after we had the verdict come out from the jury.
Yes.
They returned the verdict of not guilty. And you still got people like Newsom who are saying, well, no, he is guilty anyway. So I guess, can this be appealed by the prosecution, or is this the highest court it can go to?
I mean, there's not going to be further deliberation after this. This is clear cut, and once the case is already comes to a verdict, he can't be tried again. That's double jeopardy. So he can't be put in that situation again. If he was found guilty, though, what they would have done was declared a mistrial, most likely with prejudice. That means that the prosecution brought in arguments to the case because they knew that they were losing, and they knew that they were going to lose the case because the prosecution was absolutely horrendous this whole entire time. That they didn't have any decent arguments. They tried to bring up video games at one point and say that video games caused this violence, which is just a complete, like, that's just throwing something at the wall and seeing if it sticks at that point. But what one of the things that you did say, and you brought up about Rosenbaum and him being a pedophile and stuff, that a lot of people on the right are using that as like, oh, well, he was a pedophile. Okay, it doesn't mean that he needed to die. Like, you could be a horrible, horrible fucking person. Like, if you're not committing an act of violence or infringing on anybody else's rights, there's no reason for you to die. So that's just one of the arguments that was coming from the right on this that I need to back down. And the argument that he was a hero, he was a stupid kid, and that he was also there was another thing that, like, oh, well, Rosenbaum was a known pedophile and he could have tried to rape Kyle. The city was on fire. I don't think he had to worry about getting his pants dropped in the middle of the fucking street to get raped in front of the Ultimate gas station. I don't think that's how this works. He would be taking it. It was just the worst arguments from both sides. Start trying to either declare him a hero or a villain. He was a stupid kid who made a stupid decision. And was he right in self-defense? Yeah. Should he have even been there to defend himself in the first place? No. He should have stayed home that night. He should have watched the trials on TV like not the trials. He should have watched the protests on TV like the rest of us did.
Now, am I correct in saying that the prosecution actually argued in their closing remarks that, it was an AR-15 that was used? So, like, they actually brought up the fact it was an AR-15 style gun as part of the argument that they made to the jury at the end of the trial? Because I heard that they'd even taken that argument as saying, well, to an AR-15, and, really emphasize the point, all AR-15s are used as weapons of war and in mass shootings, and they really, use the emotional argument instead of, actually arguing from facts, which is what you need to use in a court. And if
Yeah, well, that's why the
way,
closing arguments are great for the prosecution, because they don't have to provide any facts in the closing argument. There is no objections. There is no, objection sustained. Yes, he is lying. Like, no, there's no such thing as a closing argument. You can get up there and, but like from what you said at the beginning of the case, you could lay it out. He was a mass murderer. He was the worst person. He was a white supremacist. Whole trial goes on. You find out all that's not true. Closing argument comes. He can regurgitate everything that he said in his open statement, because it's going to be the last thing that the jury hears before they go deliberate. And what they did that was really interesting. I'm not sure, because I took law classes and stuff, but I learned mainly New York law and not Wisconsin law. So I don't know exactly how theirs works, but the prosecution was actually able. The prosecution gave their closing, the defense gave their closing, and then the prosecution went back up and reclosed. So that was like weird on my part. That was just very weird. But at the same time, after whatever it's been now, 3-4 days of deliberating, it didn't make a difference what he said, because the jury could probably see right through that he was lying too. They probably didn't like the fact that he pointed a gun at them either. But that's neither here or there in the actual case. He didn't provide anything of any substance to his arguments, whether it was in the case or in the closing arguments. And he tried to use provocation as one of his big tools in his closing arguments, that it was provocation. He didn't say anything about that in the whole entire trial, and then he wants to bring it into the closing arguments. And that's like what I'm saying, is that they can say whatever they want in the closing arguments. It doesn't have to be factually true. But back to the AR-15, that he tries to make it out to be a weapon of war and whatever, that's just playing on the jury's emotions. And any sort of juror that can critically think for themselves can understand that as well. And I'm assuming that's what all 12 could feel.
Now, on the point of the jury, you brought up before the mistrial by prejudice. I wanted to get your thoughts on the two jurors that we heard that were umming and ahhing, I guess, about whether or not to say he's guilty or innocent, because apparently they were fearing for their lives from protesters.
Yeah, so there's a couple things that go into that I'm not even really sure of as of today. But for my personal reasoning, and I can have a law expert debate me on this, but for any sort of case like this, or the George Floyd case, or any sort of nationalized case, or even worldwide at this point, that the jurors need to be sequestered, because now you are opening it up to criticisms, not even just criticisms, but death threats, family death threats. You can get doxxed, you can get all your information released out there, bank account information. The jury always needs to be sequestered. Now, I didn't think that the jury was sequestered this whole entire time. That's why I'm thinking that this trial is going to be a complete sham. He's going to be found guilty on whatever charges they can find him for, because they don't want to have these riots. And like I was saying about the media feeding into this as well. But when I'm sorry, I sort of lost my train of thought. What was the question again?
about the two jurors who
yes, the jurors. Yes. All right. So my thing is, I don't know how they would even get that information. Whoever put out that story, that article, whatever, I don't know how they got that information, because nobody's allowed to talk to the jurors while the case is going on or while they're deliberating. So how they would know that two of the jurors are in fear for their lives of protests and like riots and doxing and all of that, I don't know how they would even get that information. But there was actually a case that he brought up, that one of the judge brought up, that one of the news reporters, I think it was MSNBC, I might be wrong, but they were following the jury bus after the jurors left for the day.
They were kicked out of court because of it.
Yeah, no, they said that they'll never be allowed back there again. Yeah. So is that infringing on freedom of the press? Yes. Is that also something that they shouldn't have been doing in the first place, following a jury bus? Yeah. So I don't really know what to make of that as of right now. I mean, it seems fairly reasonable. Like, don't follow the jury in a high profile case back to their hotel or wherever the hell they were staying at. Yeah, no. And I don't know how they found out that information either. I think that was also complete bullshit and just another story that they could make up so that they could throw it out into to the atmosphere and say, look, there might be protests, and rile people up even more. It's all about playing on people's psyches.
I don't know how things work in America, but I know over here in Australia, you can ask the defense or prosecution can ask for a trial with no jury, just a judge. I don't know if you guys have the same thing over in America, but like that's one thing that we can do here. Is that if it's like a case like this where people have been hearing about it in the news for, I guess in this case, almost a year. It's been more than a year because it was last year, so it's been like a year in the news. It's been drama. It's made into a whole big drama and a big saga by the media, and everyone's talking about it. You can ask for a no jury trial because that way that removes any bias that you could have from the jury. I don't know if you guys have the same option over in America because I know you guys have a lot more of a focus on the jury
Yeah.
than we do over here.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's the same way. I think it's under certain circumstances. Like I said, I'm not a lawyer or anything, but uh there are certain circumstances where they can have a bench trial versus just like a trial in front of the judge. But it depends, I guess, on what the case is. In this case, it was supposed to be a jury trial. I don't think anything really deviates from that, or that they should have just had the judge like deliver the remarks and have him judge the case. But at the same time, with the jurors, they need, in these high profile cases, they need to be sequestered. They need to be they need to be taken off of their social medias. They need to be taken off of all of this stuff until the trial's over, because they can't, like, there's been numerous cases of high profile cases where people will go out and they'll say that, hey, I'm a juror. Like, why would you want people to know that? And because they think that it's cool, and oh, I get to be on this big case and all. So sequestering the jurors is a big part to protecting their identity, protecting them from being doxxed, and protecting them from death threats and even being killed. So that's, but like I was saying earlier, the judge did bring up, he said the words that the other 6 jurors that were sequestered this whole time. So now I'm starting to think they might have been, because of what he said. But also, this judge, he's not he might be a smart man. Don't get me wrong, but he just doesn't seem cognitively there. He seems like another Biden. He seems like just switching up his words and doing all this shit, and he's not there. That's what I can say. So I would rather have the jury try him than that judge, at least.
Yeah. So with those jurors, so do we know how they split their vote? Was it like unanimous, or did some say guilty, some say innocent, or do you know how that works?
No, yeah.
We
So
have those figures.
in criminal trials here, everything has to be unanimous. So it was all 12 jurors decided that he was not guilty. That's how criminal trials work, at least. Civil trials, I believe it's, well, instead of was it beyond a reasonable doubt, it's a preponderance of the evidence. So it's literally like a 51-49 sort of thing, instead of everybody agrees or everybody doesn't, or this is beyond a reasonable doubt or there is reasonable doubt. The civil trials work differently, and I think those are the ones actually where they can have a jury or just a the judge judge the case. But yeah, I mean, in this case, they seem to have done everything right, I feel. But at the same time, like, I'm not a lawyer, so I'm not 100% certain on all of that. I just know because I'm from America, and I have like all these different news stations and local news stations and all this other shit that I listen to, and yeah, and we all go based under sort of the same laws, even though each state has their own sort of set of laws. We all have the general Second Amendment, First Amendment, so like right to protest and right to carry a gun. That's what happened that night.
I think the language we use in Australia is the balance of probabilities. So 51%, yeah, it's just averaging it out and taking, I guess, weighing up two arguments. And yeah, so I guess it'd be a 7-5 for the jury for that when you could take a 7-5 split. So do we know that all 12 said he was innocent, or do we know if any said that he was guilty, or is that
No,
all?
all 12 said he was
That's
innocent.
right.
Like I said, like
Okay.
it was a unanimous decision. Even if somebody felt that's why it takes so long, and that's why it could even end up in like a hung jury, because they just can't come to a unanimous decision. So pretty much like if 7 people said innocent and 5 people said guilty, then they have to talk it out and they have to show the evidence again and go over everything that they heard during the court case. But they don't really, like it has to be all 12 say the same thing, either guilty or not guilty, and for each one of the charges.
If it was a hung jury, what would happen then? Would it go to another trial, or how would that happen then if there was a hung jury? Because I know you brought up the idea of double jeopardy, so you couldn't be retried, obviously. So what would happen if you had a hung jury?
Yeah, so with the hung jury, I'm not 100% sure, but if they did come back and say that he was guilty, then they would have had to declare the mistrial with prejudice. That would have there's mistrial with prejudice and mistrial without prejudice. So with prejudice, you are not allowed to retry. Without prejudice, you are allowed. So that wouldn't be considered double jeopardy. With prejudice means that the prosecution was purposely screwing up the case and shit for everybody else so that they would be able to get a second crack at it. That is in itself double jeopardy. Yeah.
I guess it is a very legally complex issue that's probably too in-depth to go over just a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
You have to really do like an in-depth breakdown of the case. I was wondering if you had any favorite moments from the trial that really stood out to you as being, this is the clinch. Like this is key point that has been missed by the media.
Oh, the biggest. I have so many favorite parts of this trial, and like I was bouncing in and out, but like there was just so much good stuff. Like I said about the video game thing, but I'm sorry, just the question one more time.
Any arguments that really stood out to you as being really important, but that the media missed?
Yes. So the whole when Grosskreutz was on the when he was on the stand, and they asked him, so Kyle did not fire his weapon at you until you pointed your gun at him, and he said yes. Self-defense right there. That's one charge out of the 5 or 6 at the time with the illegal possession charge. That's just wiped out. You cannot declare manslaughter. You can't declare murder, or well, you can't even declare either of those because he didn't die. But he was acting in self-defense at that point. Once you have a gun pulled on you, you're acting in self-defense. So that was a big key point that I feel like not even the mainstream media tried to attack, but they just let it go under the rug because they knew that they couldn't attack it. They knew that they couldn't spin it any sort of way to benefit their narrative or their side, that it's just what it is. He pulled the gun and then he got shot. He fuck around and then you find out.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the big things was when the prosecutor said that you brought the gun, so therefore you don't have the right to self-defense, and I think that was completely missed by the media. They basically said, if you're carrying a firearm to defend yourself, you don't have a right to defend yourself.
Yeah, that's saying that if you have a gun, that's great. You can have a gun. You can have 12 guns on you. You can't use any of them. What's the purpose of me even having a gun then? And what's the purpose of me taking it out? And that's what would have been the bad ramifications of a guilty verdict on any charge or all charges, is that people would be afraid to protect themselves now. Both of my parents were police officers, and they are still able to carry their pistols and stuff because of New York State law. That's one of the professions that you're still allowed to like maintain your license and all that. So they take their guns into the city. They take their guns when they go into like Queens or something like that, like around the urban area. And just because they don't think that they might have to use it, but there's always that possibility. And that's what Kyle did. He said, I want to go there to help people. I want to go there to assist and give medical aid. And I might have to use a gun. So let me bring it just in case. But if he would have been found guilty, this would have stopped a lot of people from going out and actually bringing their guns with them to protect themselves. So it would have had bigger ramifications than just putting an 18-year-old in jail.
Yeah, it really was a trial for the right to self-defense, not a trial for Kyle. I think one of the things that really stood out to me is the fact that we've just heard recently, I think it came out a couple of hours ago, that there's going to be a documentary being made about Rittenhouse and about the trial. I think it was Tucker Carlson's doing a documentary on this, which I think is really surprising because you have really haven't seen anything from the media on Kyle's side, and now you've finally got a documentary being made about it. So I guess we'll finally see something out in the mainstream media area that is more on the side of Kyle. Because I know, as I said to you before the podcast, all we've heard over here in Australia is, Kyle bad, my racism, my gun. It's the exact same talking points over and over again. To hear some diversity, even though it's Tucker Carlson, to hear some diversity of opinion, I think is good, because it really shows you that, well, at least there are some people out there who want to, give a more balanced take on the court case, and which I think is really needs to get out there, because it's,
Yeah.
it'll make it more accessible to those. Like, the only reason that I found out about the case was because I was on Twitter, and I saw Twitter blew up about the Girl Scouts, where he said, yes, I put my gun at him and he shot me. I think that's the way that I first found out about it. So the media really being silent so far, I think this is probably one of the best ways to get what actually happened out there, because apparently he's interviewing Kyle himself and getting Kyle to tell his story from his perspective. All we've really heard about is the story from the perspective of the prosecution and the and Grosscoats and everyone else. We haven't really heard anything from Kyle's perspective in the media. I know
Yeah.
I'm guessing you guys have seen some, probably from Fox, but the rest of the world probably hasn't seen anything that's remotely in Kyle's favor.
Yeah, I mean, I get stuff from all sides of media, and the thing about Tucker Carlson is he's a very big talking head just for the right wing, pretty much for the Republicans. So what I see this documentary being is that he was a hero, like I was saying, that they were trying to make the point that they're going to show him doing his cadet training and all this other stuff, and him doing medical respirations on people and all this stuff. And then they're going to show him doing all these great things. Oh, look at him. He saved this person. And then he ended up getting attacked and all of this shit. So when you get into that sort of realm of, oh, he's a hero, he's not. Like I said, he's a stupid kid, made a stupid mistake, and he didn't think of the consequences. Do I still think that he had the right to self-defense? Of course. And do I think that that should be portrayed well in the movie or in the documentary? Of course, they should portray the him using self-defense and him having the gun pulled on him and all that. At the same time, do I think it's necessary? Absolutely not. We don't need to talk about this anymore. Self-defense, the right to self-defense is inalienable. You cannot take that away from people. You cannot, whether through court processes, whether through just traditional legislative infringements on their rights, you're not taking away the right to self-defense. And this is what this case showed us. So if they wanted to make a real documentary about this, and I already know how it's going to go, they should change it from what they're going to do and maybe do it about self-defense rather than making this kid seem heroic when he's really not.
Yeah, I think that is actually a really good point. They will give him the hero complex that he wants, and that that won't work out well for anyone, because I guess you'd be encouraging more young
Yeah, now
men
you're encouraging
to
other
be in the
people to
same
go out
position.
and do the same shit instead of saying, "Hey, listen, this is what actually happened. Kid was 17. Shouldn't have been there. Shouldn't have been there." And most normal people in this country can agree that he just shouldn't have been there. Once he was there, did he do the right thing? Yes, he did. But should he have been there? No. So by trying to blow it up and say, "Oh, well, he's a villain. He was out trying to murder people. He was just waiting to kill somebody." No, he wasn't. He was waiting until they were at a point where they were going to either kill him or he was going to kill them, and he was quick enough in his reactions to kill them first. And that doesn't mean that you should have a shot fired on you before you should be able to defend yourself. You're able to defend yourself once your life is at risk.
Yeah, I think if we make him into a hero, we would inspire more people to be just like him. It's only a matter of time before one of those people shoot someone in a position where they didn't have to, when they use that lethal force it being proportionate to the risk that they were in, and that's when you really start getting into a dark place, when you start encouraging basically kids to start doing vigilante work.
Yeah. Like, do I think that if this whole thing comes out, that, or the documentary or whatever, like that 17-year-olds are going to be watching it and attentive and be like, oh, I'm going to do the same exact thing? No. But is it putting that culture out there that, hey, even though some things might be better off for adults, a kid can still handle it, and we still need to recognize these patterns in life that kids, he wouldn't have been able to defend himself if he didn't have the gun, because he's not strong enough, he's not big enough, he's not a full-grown man yet. He's not able to defend himself just off pure power against other people, especially if he had a mob of people coming after him. They would have held him down. They would have, there's no telling what they would have done to him. But to bring it a little bit back to the case too, that they were, how do I phrase this? I'm trying to think. They were trying, the prosecution, as they were trying to draw in whatever anomalies that they could and tie it to him being either A, a white supremacist, or B, like just a mass shooter. So they were trying to make a big point of him pointing the gun at this girl or guy in the yellow pants on top of a cop car and telling him to get down. I don't believe that there's video evidence. If there is, I haven't seen it. But that was just another thing that they were trying to tie into this whole case, saying, well, look what he did earlier in the night. That shows that he meant to kill this person. No, that's not what it meant. It meant he might have had the gun on him. He might have had it pointed somewhat in their direction, just holding it. But he probably said, get the fuck off the cop car. Why are you on a cop car? And they probably yelled some shit back at him, and he went off about his night and did whatever else he did that night. And so did that person. But at the same time, they're trying to bring in all of these little anomalies and saying, oh, he played video games. He played Call of Duty. Call of Duty makes mass murderers. Because we all know that's true. It's just the absurdities that were thrown into this case. I remember you asked me about that earlier, about like my favorite moments. My favorite moments was just whatever came out of the prosecutor's mouth.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you. It was a complete mess from their side of things. I'm surprised it took so long to deliberate about the verdict, because there really wasn't much evidence. It was, a lot of it was like waffling on by prosecution to try and take up, I guess, airtime almost.
Well, if you really think about it too, what other two cases are going on right now, or about to go on? We have the Ahmaud Arbery case, where it was two guys, an ex-police officer and his son, I believe, or somebody else, one of his friends, that gunned down a black guy, yelled at him, stop running, while having a shotgun pointed at him, and then proceeded to drive up onto him and shoot him and kill him. What was his crimes? Did he rape one of the daughters? Did he break into their house and steal the television? No, he was walking around the neighborhood. And even if he walked into a literal abandoned house and looked around and did nothing, because that's what the camera footage showed, he didn't cause any violence. He didn't do any destruction. He was just walking around. And then you get two guys going after him. It's a very clear-cut case of murder or manslaughter, or whatever you want to call it. And everybody on all sides of the political spectrum can agree on that. So there's not going to be division over that. You can't cause any division. If you are, it's going to be off the fringe, which are already white supremacists. And we already know who those people are, like the ones walking around, shaved heads, KKK outfits, all that. Like, nobody's walking around in a KKK outfit either. But regardless, that's one of the cases that's going on. And one of the other big cases that's going to be going on is the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. Sex trafficking. You have the high-level politicians involved in this, high-level businessmen. Of course, they're going to want to try to take the attention off of that as much as possible. Try to maybe, I don't really think it was much on the jury, though, on drawing out the deliberations, but just the timing of this is so great. Granted, it could all be coincidental, and that's what seems to happen and seems to be portrayed by the media, that, oh, really, we had a very polarizing case just at the same time, where we could have had everybody together and backing the same efforts of either the prosecutor or the jury, and or the prosecutor in getting the Ahmaud Arbery killers put in jail. oh, well, we could have focused on that and had the whole country unified, but no, we'd rather divide them over the Kyle Rittenhouse issue. So it's just all tying together with that, and then the sex crimes, and like with Ghislaine Maxwell. So I'm more interested for that trial, to be honest. This was such like a BS clear-cut case of self-defense that was blown out of proportion. I'm more interested to see how were the most elite people in our world funneling children around to have them give them hand jobs in back offices and shit. The fuck?
Oh, I won't be surprised if she commits suicide.
Nah, they
during the
can't.
trial.
Nah, lightning can't strike twice like that. You can't strike twice. You already got Epstein. You got the guy who actually does know all these connections. She was more of like he told her what to do, but there's other reports that come out that say that she was telling him what to do. So she might even be a bigger hit on this case than Epstein ever could have been. But I'm really excited for that one. I want to live stream that one. That one's going to be. Oh, am I prejudiced against her? Of course.
I think most reasonable humans should be against her, and
yeah.
And the whole
mean, did the media or whatever I've watched so far before her trial date, it got into my brain to make me think bad things about her? Yes, because she's a fucking horrible person. There's a difference between that and trying to tie somebody who wears a free as fuck shirt and giving the OK symbol as being, oh, he's a white supremacist. And that was another big thing that was one of my favorite parts was when the prosecutor tried to bring up the whole thing of him giving the OK symbol and wearing the free as fuck shirt. You defended yourself. I don't give a shit if you want to boast about it. You defended yourself. And do I think that it was a display of good conscience? Do I think it was a display of good behavior? No. But do I also think that that's a point to use in a case where it has absolutely nothing to do with the shooting of these people? No, like it shouldn't be brought into the case.
Yeah, bringing up that is basically the same as libertarians who said, he's pro-police, therefore we can't support him in the case. So like, it's not relevant to the case. But just put it to one side and just focus on the right to self-defense and ignore the whole cop thing. Like we can complain about that afterwards, but right now that's not relevant to the case. There was no police involved. It was for private citizens of America. There's no need to like bring anything like that, the race card or the police card or anything like that. That's not relevant to the case. If it was relevant, then sure, bring it up, but it wasn't useful at all.
I mean, he went up after he already shot the people. He went up to the cops and they told him, "Fuck off, kid." How are you going to just tell me to fuck off? I just told you I killed you. Fuck off. So obviously the cops aren't doing their job. Somebody's gotta. I mean, that's another reason why the right's trying to make this out to be like a hero case, because he was doing what the police couldn't do. And it's like, okay, aren't you the ones defending the police? Maybe get on their asses a little bit about this. Like, it's just there's so many contradictions from both sides that come out about this, because on the right, they're saying he's a hero because he wasn't doing what the cops were doing. And on the left, they're saying leave it up to the cops. What? This has been completely reversed from what the past
complete 180
years have been. It's always been left, burn down the police stations, and right, we're gonna protect the police stations. And now it's switched, and I'm like, what's going on?
It's the same right now in Australia. As I was saying before, we did the podcast. We've got the protests on right now. We've got the right being anti-police and the left being pro-police. It's the exact same thing. It's a complete 180 of what it used to be, like even last year.
Well, this just shows you that a lot of people who are on those fringes of society that are far right, far left, they don't have morals of their own. And I'm not afraid to say that to people, because it's true. They don't. They let the party dictate their morals to them. If the party tells you to jump, jump. If they tell you to sit, sit. And you might say that sitting's better than jumping today, and then jumping's better than sitting tomorrow. So it's whatever that they feed into them. And this is a big part of people who aren't educated, or not even educated, but just aware of what's going on. Because anybody in the United States can tell you, right, as of right now, that Fox News is a right-leaning news source. One America News and Newsmax, they're all right-leaning. And then you have CNN, MSNBC, and all the other general BS mainstream news sites that lean left. And then there are some that are in the middle, very few and far between. But the thing is, people got to understand that everything has biases in life. Even my content, I try to be as impartial as possible. I try to say, even what I do is saying that he's not a hero or a villain. I don't side with either of them. I'm saying it's something in the middle, that he shouldn't have been there, did the right thing, sort of not, and then he had unintended consequences. But the thing is, there are like any sort of information you're getting, even my information, anything that you get from me, I'm going to obviously put out a bunch of shit against the government. Now, has the government done relatively okay things here and there? I'm sure you could pick them out, but I choose to focus on the bad shit that the government's done, because this is shit that we can actually change. This is shit that we can get people elected to make reform on and actually get rid of things that have been hindering society for so long. So am I biased against the government? Yeah. And could I hate prosecutors because they work for the government? Yeah. So even my take on a court case could be different from what somebody on the right or on the left is thinking, or somebody who's not political at all. But like I was saying, the people don't have morals because they let these sort of news stations and stuff feed into their brains. Oh, I get home from work, I'll watch an hour of MSNBC and fry my brain that way, instead of going off and doing a hobby or a recreational activity, and you're able to actually do something constructive with your life. You sit down, you let them feed you bullshit, and you don't go off and do your own research. If they tell you that Kyle is a white supremacist, then you're going to say, Kyle's a white supremacist. And you're going to go out to work next day and say, hear about that Kyle? He's a white supremacist. And the guy's next one is going to go, well, I heard he was here. And it's like, oh, well, and they get into an argument at work. And then this is how, this is literally just how society runs nowadays. And it's very sad. It's deteriorating.
Yeah, you're completely correct there. It is really division left right, when in fact it should probably be top bottom, state against the rest of us.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, they're keeping it as left against right, because if we unite against them, then they know they can't, defeat us. They have to keep us divided and not let us unite on issues, which is why it's always, twisting every throw they can to make the left hate the right and vice versa.
Well, it's divide and conquer. It's the fact that if you have people squabbling over stupid issues all the time and trying to come up with more of these stupid issues for them to fight over, they're not going to be focused on the bigger picture. They're not going to be focused on things such as the Federal Reserve. They're not going to be focused on things such as like the people that are unelected bureaucrats in organizations such as the ATF, DEA, FDA, the CDC, things that have been affecting people's lives, like the FDA and the CDC for the past year and a half, 2 years. They're not focused on that. They're not focused on the people behind that, because it's wear your mask. It's get the vaccine. It's social justice. In this house, we believe that Black Lives Matter and science is, we can trust science, and you create these fringe ideas that people who even say follow the science nowadays, it's like, what science? The science that is portrayed over your news media, the science that portrayed over their news media, the science that's being shut out by both medias? Because I think I'd rather listen to that one. The one that's getting shut out by everybody else, they obviously have something to say. Now, whether that's good or bad, I can make my own assessment on that, but I want to hear that because people are trying to shut it out. And that's what a lot of, that's where I see a lot of backlash more backlash is coming against the main two parties and their medias and stuff, because it's like, when you see somebody that's getting censored, when you see that somebody that's getting pushed out of the narrative and the cycle and everything, that people do like say, oh, well, what are they saying? And they find out and they go, oh, well, he's preaching something that I believe in. Why aren't they listening to me? Oh, they don't want me to be heard. And then this is what creates this whole fuel of addiction and cycle of just fighting with media companies, fighting with our government, fighting with other businesses, fighting with other people. It's just constant fighting and constant fear. And that's the other thing that they like to bring up, is the fear of, in the United States, we've had these wars for years. We've had the war on terror. Now we have the war on COVID, the war on drugs. It's all wars against ideas. And terrorism is an idea. Terrorism is the idea that somebody can come in and create havoc in your life, whether that's through destroying businesses, whether that's through doxing you, whether that's through terrorism could even be defined as somebody coming onto my computer and fucking around with all of my internals and shit. More cyber terrorism, but still terrorism. If they take away my screen right now and say I can't have it back unless I'm paying a $125,000 ransom, then that's terrorism. So by declaring wars on ideas, it makes it so much easier for the goal lines to change and for the goalposts to move back. Because if it's a war on COVID, well, the vaccine protects you against COVID. Oh, great, we're out of this. Oh, not the Delta variant though. So let's get that booster shot. Okay, we'll get the booster shot. Delta. Oh, but there's another variant. Delta Super Plus, Delta Super Mega Ultra Plus, Super Double times 2. This one, and it just keeps going and going and going and going. And people think that they can comply their way out of tyranny, and they can't.
Yeah.
Sorry, I went into like
completely agree.
Thought.
Yes, no, I completely agree with you for it. Yeah. I have one last question to ask you. About the jump kick man and your thoughts on him.
If I'm gonna be completely honest with you, I don't know too much about Jump Kick Man. I really don't. All I've seen was the video footage of him jumping, kicking Kyle in the head and shit. I don't know what anybody wants him to do about that. Turn around, find the guy that kicked him in the head and shoot him, or that would have caused more of a problem than what already happened. So I think how it played out and what he did was just and right and clear-cut self-defense, like I've been saying. Anything outside of that, if he would have maybe even gotten up and tried to go after him, that could have been a whole nother sort of case where he's not in the self-defense anymore. He's chasing somebody down. So there's, I think how it worked out well for Kyle, as well as it worked out for our right to self-defense in this country.
Yeah. Well, I think the reason why that person wasn't brought up by the prosecution is like, he was a black man. I think it was like 40 something, and maybe early 40s. So the reason he wasn't brought up because he was a black person who attacked Kyle. So they brought him up. They couldn't use the race argument.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you get the one black guy that attacks Kyle and then he doesn't shoot him. Like, yeah, that's going to sound like that's going to completely take away from their white supremacy case is that, well, he had an opportunity after being attacked by 4 people now to shoot one of them that was black, and he didn't. So, yeah, that would completely wipe away their narrative. That would completely wipe away what the left has been pushing this whole entire time. Why would they? I wouldn't. If I was in that same position, if I was thinking the way that they were thinking, I wouldn't do the same shit.
In fact, if anything, you could argue that, well, the jump kick aggravated Kyle and put him in a war, like increased his concern for his own life when it came to Huber, and then shot Huber and Grosskreutz later on. He was more likely to shoot them because he'd already been threatened by the jump kick man, whatever his. I don't know. I don't think his name's out there.
I don't even think that has a big impact at all. I think that him being chased down by in my video I did about this, I think I said about 100. It's probably less than that, probably more like 20, 25. You know, I saw a picture. I thought it was more than that, but I guess I'm wrong. So even if you're getting chased down by 15 people, let's say 10 people are yelling at you saying, we're going to find you and we're going to kill you. If I see you alone tonight, you're dead. Yeah, I'm going to have reason to want to have my guard up and want to protect myself. So anything outside of that, even if it did bring Jump Kick Man into the equation, him being kicked in the head, yeah, that was a physical act of violence against him. But also having 15 people, 20, 25 people marching at you saying, we're going to kill you, that's also calls for right to self-defense.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. That makes sense. You know, it was, I think that's overlooked. The fact that a mob was chasing him is completely overlooked in the case because, that's when you have 20, 25 people, chasing you, you're going to obviously fear for your life.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why the jury saw what happened in this case. They saw the video evidence and they were like, yeah, no, innocent.
Yes. Because, and I think even then, they weren't shown all the evidence. Am I correct in saying that there was footage that they weren't shown during the trial?
I don't know about that. What I do know is one of the reasons that they would have declared a mistrial with prejudice if the case would have been deliberated a different way, and they would have came out with a different verdict, that the prosecution had a video, and when they sent it to the defense, because they're supposed to share all of their evidence, when they sent it to the defense, they sent it in a lower resolution. So pretty much it was like grainier and you couldn't see as well. And that's what they gave the defense for theirs. So that's a pretty big thing. Like, even though like their defense was that they were boomers that don't know how to use computers, which, if you're a lawyer, you should know isn't a reasonable argument. Ignorance is no excuse under the eyes of the law. So they're supposed to turn over every piece of evidence intact the way that it's supposed to be. But that's the only thing that I've really heard about any of the videos being either suppressed or messed up or anything like that.
Yeah. My final question for you is, where do you see this going forward? What do you see the impact of this being on American society beyond just riots and protesting?
Honestly, with the riots and protests, I'm going to be honest, tonight I've been moving around and stuff all night, so I haven't really watched TV. I don't know if there is currently protests going on. If it does, if we do go down that route, it could be 2020 all over again. It could be the fact that we're having riots and looting and protests and all this other shit. Or it could be the fact that we got bigger fish to fry now. People are back out at work. Like, because the other thing you got to think about, too, is we were locked down all last year. Even here in New York and the United States and stuff, we were locked down. So people lost their jobs. People didn't have an income. People were just didn't have anything to do. And idle hands find evil things to do with. So what they did was there was this big case about George Floyd. Oh, let's go. I don't have work. I don't have anything to do. Let's go show our support for George Floyd. And then they went down there, and then it was massive numbers because massive amount of people were unemployed, and they were able to they were afforded the opportunity to actually go down there and do these things. This time around, I see it could turn out not as bad, honestly, and I don't think it might not be anything at all because of the fact that people are back at work. People are back doing things again. The world's opening, or the country's opening up, because I can't say the world because of Australia. But the country's opening back up. People are back out doing things. People have more to their lives than just to protest social justice issues, and especially a justice issue that was already just settled in court earlier this morning. So it can go either way for me, honestly. But at the same time, there's not going to be another Kyle Rittenhouse. I'll tell you that. At least this time around, there's not going to be somebody going out doing the same exact thing he did because nobody wants to be put in that position.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, that's all the questions that I have for you. Is anything you want to bring up as a concluding remarks? Any final statements about this case?
Like I've been saying, it is a clear-cut self-defense case. If you guys do have any questions, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to answer them. And if you have any information that I haven't seen, because let's be honest, I haven't seen 100% of the information. Absolutely not. I don't have that fucking time or that energy or like that. Like I said, there's bigger fish to fry nowadays. I got work. I got things to do. So if you guys have any rebuttals, let me know, and I'll be happy to address them. And then if you guys do want any clarification on anything, feel free to hit me up, and I'll see what I can do. But thank you for having me on. I appreciate that.
No worries. Anything to plug before we finish up?
Yes, let's do Instagram, AngeloForLiberty, at AngeloForLiberty, Twitter, at LibertyAngelo, TikTok, at AngeloForLiberty, and go to my YouTube channel, AngeloForLiberty, all one word.
And go watch his podcast that he did on the Rittenhouse trial as well.
Yes, yeah, I have a video on the Rittenhouse trial. As of today is Friday, so I have one video coming out tonight with Scott Thompson, and then on Saturday, I'll announce it on here, because why not? Spike Cohen will be on my podcast. So stay tuned for that. That'll be tomorrow. It'll be uploaded, and we went into a pretty good in-depth hour conversation, so definitely stay tuned for that.
All right, thank you, and thanks for coming on.
Thank you, and thank you, and thank Gumtree of Liberty for hosting this and producing this, and Thank you especially.
Thank you.